They sold her to a
You look
vampire
worried.
lord for
It's late. We should
$50,000,
go.
calling her
Just a
barren
little
and
longer.
worthless.
Something's
But
not
Lord
right.
Dorian Blackthorn discovered she carried the rarest bloodline in 400 years, capable of giving him the one thing immortals cannot have: a living heir. In 60 days, she would either birth a miracle or die trying. This is how a discarded waitress became the most powerful woman in the supernatural world. The neon sign outside the Nighthawk Diner flickered at 2:47 a.m., casting
Here it is,
nervous
as
shadows
requested.
across cracked
Good.
linoleum
Let's see if it's
that
to
had
my
seen
taste.
better decades.
Be careful, it's very hot.
Thalia Grayson
Perfect.
wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. Her movements automatic, efficient, empty. The rag smelled of bleach and broken promises. She was 28 years old and invisible. The dinner rush, if you could call 4 truckers and a drunk college student, a rush had ended an hour ago. Now the diner sat in that hollow space between night and morning when even Boston seemed to hold its breath. Through the grease-filmed windows, South Boston stretched out in shades of sodium orange and despair. Thalia's reflection stared back at her from the coffee pot's chrome surface. Mousy brown hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Eyes the color of river moss, too large for a face that had learned to apologize for existing. The polyester uniform hung on her frame like a hand-me-down she'd never quite grown into. 28 years old, 2 jobs, 1 dying sister, 0 future. The bell above the door chimed. Thalia didn't look up. Late-night customers were all the same. Lonely, desperate, looking for something warm in a cold world, even if it was just burnt coffee and yesterday's pie. "We close in 10 minutes, she said, reaching for a menu without raising her eyes. "But I can get you—" The temperature dropped, not gradually, not like a draft from an open door. The air itself seemed to freeze mid-breath, sucking warmth from the room with predatory hunger. Thalia's skin prickled. The coffee pot in her hands suddenly felt heavy as lead. She looked up. The man standing in the doorway shouldn't have fit through it. Not because of size, though he was tall, but because of presence. He filled the space the way a knife fills a wound, completely, violently, impossibly. He wore a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her car. Beneath it, a black shirt open at the collar revealed skin the color of moonlight on marble. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic cruelty, like something carved by an artist who understood beauty but had forgotten kindness. Dark hair, black as a closed coffin, fell across a forehead that had never known worry. But his eyes were the frozen heart of a glacier. Pale blue, almost colorless and ancient. So ancient that looking into them felt like staring into the abyss between stars. Vampire. The word didn't form in Thalia's mind so much as it crystallized from pure instinct. 4 years. 4 years since she'd felt this specific flavor of terror, this cocktail of awe and dread that only came from standing in the presence of an apex predator wearing human skin. Her hand trembled. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the pot, scalding her wrist. She didn't flinch. "Thalia Grayson." His voice was silk wrapped around a blade. Not a question, a statement of ownership. She set down the coffee pot with exaggerated care. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she kept her face blank. Waitresses learned early to hide fear. It only made the predators hungrier. "We're closed," she said again. Her voice barely shook. A small victory. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something colder. "No," he said softly. "You're not." He moved toward the counter and the movement was wrong. Too fluid. Too perfect. Humans stumbled, shuffled, hesitated. This man glided like smoke, like inevitability. Thalia's fingers found the panic button beneath the register. The one that called Joe the line cook with the baseball bat. The one that had never in 3 years of late shifts actually needed to be pressed. "I wouldn't." The vampire's eyes flicked to her hand. He could see through the counter. Of course he could. "Joseph left 20 minutes ago. You sent him home early because your sister called from the hospital. Bryn, stage 4 lymphoma. 3 weeks until the experimental treatment window closes. $500,000 you don't have." Ice water flooded Thalia's veins. How? She cut herself off. Stupid question. Vampires knew everything. That's what made them dangerous. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the stool across from him. "I'd rather stand." That wasn't a request. Their eyes locked. For a moment, just a moment, Thalia considered running. The back door was 15 feet away. She could be through it in seconds, into the alley, into the maze of South Boston's underbelly, where even vampires might lose her trail. But Bryn's face floated in her mind. Pale, thin, apologizing for being a burden with every labored breath. Thalia sat. The vampire studied her with the intensity of a jeweler examining a diamond. Looking for flaws. Finding them. Calculating value anyway. "You don't remember me," he said. I remember all the monsters. A flash of something crossed his face. Hurt, impossible. Vampires didn't feel. They mimicked, they hunted, they consumed. My name, he said with exaggerated patience, is Dorian Blackthorne. 4 years ago, you managed my financial empire, organized my affairs, sat across from me every morning reviewing stock portfolios over blood-laced coffee. You were the best Bloodbound I'd ever had. The past slammed into Thalia like a fist. Blackthorne estate, marble floors and crystal chandeliers, silk dresses that cost more than most people earned in a year. The weight of Dorian's gaze as she presented quarterly reports, his cold fingers brushing her wrist when she handed him papers, the strange electricity of the blood bond humming between them like a live wire. And then the signet ring, the accusations, the council's cold eyes as they judged her guilty. You exiled me. Her voice came out flat. Dead. I saved your life. You called me a thief in front of 300 witnesses. Because you were accused of treason, Dorian said, leaning out forward. Because Isolde Ravencroft planted evidence in your quarters and convinced half the council you were selling our secrets to the Lycan clans. Do you know what the penalty for bloodbound treason is, Thalia? She knew. Everyone knew. Execution. Public execution, Dorian corrected. Drawn out over 3 days. I've seen it done. It's not civilized. He paused. Exile was mercy. Mercy. Thalia laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. You let them destroy my reputation. Blacklist me from every decent job in the city. I lost my apartment, my savings. I spent 2 months sleeping in my car. You lived. Barely. Barely is more than dead. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 4 years of unsaid things. Finally, Thalia broke it. Why are you here? Dorian reached into his coat and withdrew a black leather folder. He placed it on the counter between them with the reverence of a man presenting a loaded gun. I need you to carry my child. The world tilted. Thalia's brain stuttered, trying to process words that made no sense in that order. Vampires didn't have children. Everyone knew that. They created fledglings, yes, turned humans into corrupted copies. But birth pregnancy, life from death impossible. I don't understand, she managed. The council has passed a new law, Dorian said. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. The Blood Lineage Act. Every vampire lord must produce a living heir within 60 days or forfeit their territory. But you can't. There is a ritual. He cut her off. Ancient magic. Pre-Roman. It requires a specific alignment of celestial bodies, a massive sacrifice of power, and a human surrogate who has survived a vampire blood bond before. His pale eyes bored into hers. You're the only woman in 300 years who qualifies. Thalia's mind raced. This was insane. This was impossible. This was no. She stood abruptly. The stool scraped against linoleum. Absolutely not. You can't walk in here after 4 years and ask me to, she couldn't even say it, find someone else. There is no one else. Then you lose your territory. And if I lose my territory, the Ravencroft line takes Boston. Isolde Ravencroft, the woman who framed you. Dorian stood as well, towering over her. She will hunt you down within a week. Not because you're a threat, but because you're a loose end, a witness to her treachery. She'll make it look like an accident, a mugging gone wrong, a gas leak. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice, Dorian corrected. Carry my child for 60 days. In exchange, your sister receives the best cancer treatment money can buy. Zurich Institute of Medicine. Specialists who've cured cases worse than Bryn's. Full funding. Plus $10 million in restoration of your name. $10 million. The number hung in the air like a prayer. Thalia thought of Bryn's hollow eyes, the way her little sister cried in the bathroom so Thalia wouldn't hear. The pamphlets for hospice care Thalia had hidden in her glove compartment because she couldn't bear to look at them. What's the catch? Her voice came out hoarse. The ritual has a 60% mortality rate for the human carrier. There it was. The knife beneath the silk. So I have a 40% chance of survival. Yes. And if I refuse, Dorian's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, grew colder. Then I walk out that door. Your sister dies in 3 weeks. Isolde takes Boston in 60 days. And eventually, probably sooner than later, you die too. Quietly. Forgotten. Worthless. The word hit like a slap. Worthless. That's what her stepmother had called her when she'd refused to pay Thalia's college tuition. Worthless. What the loan officer had said when she tried to get money for Bryn's treatment. Worthless. What she saw in the mirror every morning when she put on this goddamn polyester uniform. But Dorian was still looking at her. Not with pity, not with contempt, with something else. Something that looked almost like, "Hope, why me?" Thalia whispered. "Really? Why me?" For the first time, Dorian hesitated, a crack in the marble facade. "Because when I fed from you, when our blood bond formed, I felt something I haven't felt in 400 years. He paused. "I felt warm." Across the city in a ballroom that predated the American Revolution, the Vampire Council convened. 12 lords and ladies sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a perfect circle. Each represented a bloodline older than nations. Each controlled territory worth billions. Each wore their power like a second skin. At the head of the circle sat Ambrose Sterling, the High Inquisitor. His eyes were wrapped in black silk, a symbol of justice's blindness, but he saw more than any of them. Magic let him peer into souls' red intentions. Taste lies on the air like ash. "Order," he said, and the room fell silent with the abruptness of a guillotine blade. Dorian Blackthorne stood at the center of the circle. He'd been standing for 3 hours. They'd made him stand. A petty power play. He bore it with the same blank expression he'd worn since arriving. "The council has reviewed your petition," Ambrose said, "and we find it insufficient." "Insufficient?" Dorian's voice carried no inflection. "I have ruled Boston for 2 centuries without incident. My territory is stable, profitable, peaceful." "Stagnant," a voice interrupted. Isolde Ravencroft rose from her seat like a cobra uncoiling. She wore crimson silk that clung to curves designed to distract men from the viper's mind beneath. Blood-red lips curved in a smile sharp enough to cut. "Your territory is stagnant, Lord Blackthorne," she purred. "No new bloodlines, no expansion, no heirs. The Blood Lineage Act was created to prevent exactly this kind of sterility." "I have fledglings." "Fledglings are not heirs," Isolde countered. "They're servants. The council requires living progeny, children who can walk in sunlight, bridge the gap between our world and theirs. Surely you understand the importance of evolution." Dorian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I understand the council's will." "Then you understand you have 60 days. Ambrose's voice cut through the tension. "Produce a living heir or forfeit Boston to the next strongest claimant." Every eye in the room turned to Isolde. She didn't bother to hide her smile. "I have already begun preparations," Dorian said quietly. "The Moonborn ritual is a fairy tale," Isolde interrupted. "Ancient superstition. No vampire has successfully birthed a living child in recorded history." "Then I will be the first. Or you will fail spectacularly." Isolde walked toward him, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. "And when you do, I will take very good care of Boston. All of Boston." She paused. "Including the loose ends you left behind." Threat delivered. Message received. Dorian's hands clenched at his sides. Only Ambrose, with his magical sight, saw the fury burning beneath the cold exterior. Saw how close the vampire lord came to tearing Isolde's throat out, right there in council chambers. 60 days, Ambrose repeated. Session adjourned. The lords and ladies filed out, already whispering, already planning, already calculating angles. Dorian remained standing in the center of the circle. "You're going to try it," Ambrose said, not a question. "The Inquisitor always knew. Yes. The Grayson girl. Yes. She'll likely die. Better than certainly dying." Dorian finally turned to look at the blind seer. "I didn't exile her because I believed Isolde's lies, Ambrose. You know that." "I know." The Inquisitor's rapt eyes somehow seemed to bore into him anyway. "I also know you exiled her because if you'd defended her, Isolde would have pushed for a full investigation. And a full investigation would have revealed that you and Thalia had complicated feelings, inappropriate feelings, the kind that make a lord vulnerable." Dorian said nothing. "You still have those feelings," Ambrose continued. "Don't you, Ashbaum? What I feel is irrelevant. On the contrary, the Moonborn ritual requires more than compatible biology. It requires genuine connection. Love, even. Can you love her, Dorian? Or will you simply use her and discard her like every other tool in your arsenal?" Dorian walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the empty chamber. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going to find out." Talia sat in the waiting room of Boston General, clutching a cup of cafeteria coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like dying wasps. Around her, other families waited. Other people loved and feared and hoped. She was so tired of hoping. The doctor emerged at 4:15 a.m. Dr. Patricia Morrison, mid-50s, kind eyes that had delivered too much bad news and learned to hide the weight of it behind professional courtesy. Ms. Grayson. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle. Too gentle. You can see her now. Bryn's room was on the 4th floor, the oncology ward. Thalia had memorized every inch of it over the past 6 months. The motivational posters that rang hollow. The hand sanitizer stations. The hushed voices of nurses who'd stopped trying to be cheerful. Her sister lay propped against pillows that made her look even smaller than she was. At 24, Bryn should have been finishing graduate school, falling in love, making mistakes, and learning from them. Instead, she was here, dying by degrees. Hey, you! Bryn's voice came out paper thin. You're here late. My shift ended early. Talia pulled a chair to the bedside. How are you feeling? Like $1,000,000. Bryn managed to smile. $1,000,000 that got hit by a truck, run over by a steamroller, and left in the sun to rot. So improvement from yesterday. They both laughed. The sound was fragile, desperate, real. They want me to start hospice planning, Bryn said after the laughter faded. Dr. Morrison, she was very nice about it, very professional, but basically she's saying give up. Talia's throat closed. The experimental treatment is $500,000 we don't have. Bryn reached out and took Talia's hand. Her fingers were bird bone fragile. You've done everything you could. Tukos, no life. You've already sacrificed so much, not enough. The words came out fierce. Never enough. Thali. Bryn used the childhood nickname. I need you to hear me. If my time is limited, I don't want to spend it watching you destroy yourself to trying to save me. I want you to live. Really live. Not just survive. You're not dying. Everyone's dying. I'm just doing it faster. Talia pulled her hand away, stood, walked to the window. Outside Boston was waking up. Coffee shops opening. People rushing to jobs they hated to pay for lives they tolerated. The cycle continuing, meaningless, relentless. Dorian's offer whispered in her mind. 60% mortality rate, but also Zurich Institute. Specialists. Cure. What if I could fix this, Thalia said quietly. What if I could get the money, all of it, enough for the treatment and more? Bryn's eyes narrowed. Thalia, what are you talking about? Someone made me an offer. What kind of offer? Thalia turned to face her sister. The kind that might kill me, but also the kind that would definitely save you. No, Bryn's voice gained strength. Absolutely not. Whatever insane thing you're thinking, it's not your choice. Like hell it isn't. You're talking about dying for me. I'm talking about giving you a chance to live. Talia moved back to the bedside, gripped the railing. You're 24 years old, Bryn. You're supposed to have decades ahead of you. Fall in love, have kids, complain about taxes and terrible television. I can give you that. At what cost? 60% chance I don't make it, 40% I do. Those are terrible odds. Better than your odds without treatment. Talia's eyes burned. Please, let me do this. Let me be worth something. Bryn stared at her sister, really looked at her, saw the desperation, the determination, the bone-deep need to matter. You're already worth everything, Bryn whispered. Don't you know that? Talia didn't answer. Couldn't, because the truth was she didn't. She'd never known that, and maybe in some twisted way, dying for her sister would finally prove she'd been worth keeping alive. Thalia returned to the Nighthawk at dawn to find Dorian still there. He sat in the same booth utterly motionless, looking like a statue of patience. When she entered, his eyes tracked her with predatory precision. I need to see the contract, she said without preamble. Dorian slid the black leather folder across the table. Thalia sat, opened it, read. The document was written in archaic script, the kind lawyers use when they wanted to intimidate people into signing without reading. But Thalia had spent 5 years managing vampire contracts. She knew the language, knew the loopholes, knew where bodies were buried. She read every word. Article 1. The surrogate Thalia Grayson agrees to carry the progeny of Lord Dorian Blackthorne through completion of the Moonborn ritual. Article 2. Term of gestation shall be 60 days from date of conception to date of birth. 60 days. Accelerated vampire biology. Her body would go through 9 months of pregnancy in 2 months. The thought made her stomach turn. Article 3. Upon successful live birth, the surrogate shall receive a complete medical treatment for Bryn Grayson, including experimental protocols at Zurich Institute of Medicine, value not to exceed 2 million US dollars. B. Monetary compensation of 10 million US dollars. C. Restoration of reputation and status within vampire society. Immediate release from all bonds and obligations. Article 4. Should the surrogate perish during gestation or birth? Compensation detailed in Article 3 shall still be rendered to Bryn Grayson in full. Thalia's hands trembled. Even if she died, Bryn would be saved. There's a clause missing, she said. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Oh, what happens to the child after birth? The child remains with me, as my heir. No custody rights for me. You'll be free to leave. Live your life. The child is mine. Something in Thalia's chest tightened. She didn't know why. This was business, a transaction. Womb for rent. And yet, I want visitation rights written in. Dorian studied her. Why pataho? Because I'm not an incubator. If I'm risking my life to bring a child into this world, I deserve to know what happens to them. For a long moment, Dorian said nothing. Then impossibly, he smiled. It transformed his face, made him look almost human. You're negotiating. I'm protecting my interest. The Thalia I remember wouldn't have dared negotiate with me 4 years ago. The Thalia you remember died when you exiled her. I'm what's left. Dorian pulled a pen from his jacket. In elegant script, he added a new clause at the bottom of the contract article. 5. The surrogate shall retain visiting rights to the child, terms to be negotiated in good faith following successful birth. He signed it, then slid the pen to Thalia. Last chance to run, he said softly. Thalia looked at the contract, at the numbers that would save Bryn, at the impossible promise of a future where she mattered. She picked up the pen, her hand hovered over the signature line. In her mind, she saw Bryn's face, pale, hopeful, alive. She signed. The moment the ink dried, the paper flared with blue light. Magic sealed the contract, bound them together, made the impossible inevitable. What happens now? Thalia asked. Now, Dorian said, standing, you come with me. The Maybach that picked them up was black as a hearse and twice as silent. Thalia sat in the back seat, separated from Dorian by expensive leather and 4 years of history. Neither spoke. The silence felt like a living thing. Boston passed by the tinted windows. Morning commuters, coffee shops, normal people living normal lives. Thalia watched them with the detachment of an astronaut leaving Earth. She was crossing into another world now. No turning back. Blackthorn Estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. The mansion was Gothic Revival architecture, all sharp angles and gargoyles designed to intimidate. It succeeded. The iron gates groaned open. The car glided up a circular driveway paved with stones that probably cost more than most houses. Thalia's reflection stared back at her from the car window. She looked small, insignificant, exactly as worthless as everyone had always said. The front door opened before they reached it. A man stood waiting. 60 years old, impeccably dressed in a butler's uniform that belonged in a Victorian novel. His face was carved from disapproval and duty in equal measure. Master Dorian, he said, bowing slightly. Then his eyes found Thalia. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, pity, quickly hidden. And Miss Grayson, we did not expect to see you again. Hello, William, Thalia said quietly. William had been the one to escort her out the night of her exile. He'd looked at her with pity then too. She'd hated him for it. Prepare the East Wing, Dorian ordered. Miss Grayson will be staying indefinitely. Of course, my lord. William's gaze lingered on Thalia. Shall I inform the staff? Tell them she is under my personal protection. Anyone who shows her disrespect answers to me. The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. William bowed deeper. As you wish. Thalia followed Dorian through the grand foyer. The house was exactly as she remembered. Bullet, red, silent, oil paintings of dead blackthorns lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her. Judge her. Find her wanting. The East Wing was a series of connected rooms that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Bedroom with a 4-poster bed. Sitting room with furniture that looked like museum pieces. Bathroom with a tub big enough to drown in. You'll have everything you need, Dorian said from the doorway. Food, clothing, privacy. What about freedom? You signed the contract. I signed away my womb, not my autonomy. Dorian's expression hardened. The ritual is in 3 days. Until then, you stay here. The estate is warded, protected, safe. The moment you step outside, you become vulnerable. To what? To everyone who wants me to fail. He paused. Which is most of vampire society. Talia walked to the window. Below, the Atlantic crashed against rocks with violence that looked almost beautiful. She pressed her palm against the glass. It was cold. I need to call Bryn, she said. Tell her I'm okay. No, she spun around. Excuse me. No phone calls. No outside communication. Isolde has informants everywhere. The moment word spreads that you're here carrying my child, you become a target. So I'm a prisoner. You're an investment I'm protecting. The words hit like a slap. Investment. Not a person, not a partner. Property. Thalia laughed. The sound was bitter. Of course. How stupid of me to think this was anything other than a business transaction. Thalia, get out. You need to understand. Get out, her voice cracked. Tears threatened. She refused to let them fall, not in front of him, never in front of him. Dorian stared at her for a long moment. Something in his face softened, almost looked regretful. I'll have William bring you dinner, he said quietly. Then he left. Alone, Thalia collapsed onto the bed. The silk sheets smelled like money and loneliness. She curled into herself, hugging her knees to her chest, and finally let the tears come. She'd sold herself, traded her body, her life, her freedom for Bryn's chance at survival. And she'd do it again. That was the worst part. She'd do it again without hesitation. 2 days passed in isolation. Thalia saw no one but William, who brought meals she barely touched. She paced the East Wing like a caged animal, read books from the extensive library she didn't comprehend, stared at the ocean, and wondered if drowning was faster than the ritual. On the third day, William arrived with a garment bag. The Solstice Gala is tonight, he announced. Master Dorian requests your presence. I'm not going. It wasn't a request, miss. I don't care. William set the bag down with exaggerated patience. The council will be there. They need to verify that you are in fact the surrogate, that the ritual is proceeding. If you don't attend, they'll assume Lord Dorian is stalling. They'll accelerate his timeline. Force his hand. Talia closed her eyes. Trapped. Again. Always. What time? She asked dully. 8 o'clock. I'll return at 7 to help you prepare. The dress William brought was midnight blue velvet, simple, elegant, the kind of expensive that whispered instead of shouted. Thalia put it on mechanically, her body moving through motions her mind had abandoned. William appeared at 7 sharp. He took one look at her and produced a small box from his jacket. From Master Dorian, he said. Inside was a necklace, obsidian and silver. Beautiful. Cold. I don't want his jewelry. It's not jewelry, William corrected. It's a ward, protection magic. Anyone who tries to harm you while wearing it will suffer consequences. Talia picked up the necklace. The obsidian felt warm against her palm. Alive. He's protecting his investment, she said bitterly. William's expression softened slightly. Perhaps he's protecting someone he once cared for very deeply. Their eyes met. He exiled me, Thalia whispered. He saved your life, William replied. Sometimes, Miss Grayson, those are the same thing. The ballroom of Blackthorn Estate could have housed a cathedral. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings like frozen tears. Vampires in formal wear circulated like beautiful predators at a watering hole. The air hummed with power and barely concealed violence. Thalia stood at the top of the grand staircase, one hand on the marble banister, the other pressed against her stomach. Below, hundreds of immortal eyes turned toward her, assessed her, found her wanting. Dorian appeared at her side. He wore black formal wear that made him look like death's most elegant emissary. When he offered his arm, she hesitated. They're watching, he murmured. Show weakness now, and they'll tear you all apart. Talia took his arm. Together they descended. Whispers followed them like smoke. She caught fragments. The disgraced Bloodbound, actually trying the Moonborn ritual. She won't survive the first week. Desperate, Thalia kept her face blank, chin up, eyes forward, the way she'd learned to survive as a waitress when drunks got handsy. Smile, nod, survive. At the bottom of the stairs, the crowd parted. Isolde Ravencroft stood waiting. She was devastating. Blood-red dress that clung to curves designed to distract. Raven hair cascading over pale shoulders, lips the color of fresh kills. She smiled like a shark scenting blood. Lord Blackthorn, Isolde purred. How lovely to see you. And you brought, oh. Her eyes raked over Thalia. The help. How sentimental. Lady Ravencroft. Dorian's voice could have frozen fire. Always a pleasure. Was it? Isolde circled them slowly. I heard rumors you were attempting the impossible, trying to produce an heir through, what was it, ancient magic fairy tale nonsense. She stopped directly in front of Thalia. Using this, the contempt in that single word was absolute. Thalia met her gaze, held it. I'm not a this, she said quietly. I'm a person. Are you? Isolde laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Last time you were here, you were a thief, caught red-handed stealing from your master. And now you're back as his broodmare. One wonders which position is more degrading. Heat flooded Thalia's face. Around them, vampires watched, waiting, hoping for drama. That's enough, Dorian said coldly. Is it? I'm merely curious about your choice of surrogate. Surely there were more suitable candidates. Isolde's smile sharpened. Unless you chose her specifically. Unless there are feelings involved. How very human of you, Dorian. My choice is council approved, verified by the Inquisitor. Unless you are questioning Ambrose Sterling's judgment. Isolde's expression flickered. Ambrose was untouchable. Even she knew that. Of course not, she said smoothly. I'm simply concerned for the poor girl. The Moonborn ritual has a terrible survival rate. It would be tragic if she died, especially after you went through all this trouble to bring her back. She won't die. You sound confident. I wonder. Isolde leaned in close to Thalia, invading her space, her breath cold against Thalia's ear. I wonder if he told you the truth. About why he really exiled you 4 years ago. Talia's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? She whispered. Ask him, Isolde breathed. Ask him what he was doing the night the signet ring went missing. Ask him who he was with. And ask yourself why a man would so readily throw away the woman he supposedly cared for. She pulled back, smile radiant, and addressed the crowd. The council recognizes Lord Blackthorn's attempt at the Moonborn ritual. We look forward to seeing the results. Her eyes found Thalia one last time. Or the funeral. She swept away, leaving Thalia standing in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by predators drowning in doubt. Thalia fled, not running. That would show weakness. But she moved through the crowd with single-minded determination, ignoring Dorian's calls, pushing through vampires who smelled like expensive cologne and old blood until she burst through French doors onto a stone balcony. The night air hit her like a slap. Cold, clean, real. She gripped the balcony railing, her knuckles white, breathing hard. Below, the ocean crashed against rocks. The sound was almost peaceful. Almost. Quite the performance in there. Thalia spun. Isolde Ravencroft stood in the doorway, backlit by the ballroom's golden glow. Alone. Predator and prey. No witnesses. Leave me alone, Thalia said. Oh, I will, in a moment. But first, I thought you deserved the truth. Isolde walked closer. Dorian didn't tell you everything, did he, about the night you were exiled? He said you framed me. I did, Isolde agreed easily. I planted the signet ring in your quarters, bribed witnesses, convinced the council you were a traitor. She paused. But do you know why it was so easy to convince them? Thalia's throat closed. Because that night, while you slept in your little room, Dorian was with me. Isolde's smile was poisonous. In his chambers, in his bed, we'd been negotiating an alliance between our territories. The negotiations got personal. You're lying. Ask him. See what he says. See if he denies it. Isolde's eyes glittered. He exiled you not to save you, darling. He exiled you to hide his shame. To cover up the fact that he'd betrayed the blood bond by fucking me. You were inconvenient, a witness to his weakness. So he removed you. The words were knives. Each one found its mark. And now he's brought you back, Isolde continued. Not because he cares, not because you matter, but because you're useful. A womb, an incubator, a means to an end. And when you've served your purpose, when you've birthed his heir or died trying, he'll discard you again. Just like before. Thalia couldn't breathe. The world tilted. You're wrong, she whispered. Am I? Then why did he choose you out of all the women in the world? Why the one he exiled in disgrace? Isolde leaned in close. Because you're weak, desperate, easy to manipulate. He knew you'd say yes, knew you'd sacrifice yourself for your dying sister. He's using you, Thalia. He's always been using you. Thalia's vision blurred, tears threatened. You should leave, Isolde said gently, almost kindly. Before the ritual, before it's too late, run, disappear, let him fail, let him lose everything. It's what he deserves. She turned to leave. Why? Thalia's voice cracked. Why tell me this? Isolde looked back over her shoulder. Because I want you to know, when you're dying in childbirth, when your body is tearing itself apart to birth his monster, that it was all for nothing, that he never cared, that you died for a lie. She left. Alone on the balcony, Thalia collapsed against the railing. Sobs racked her body. Everything Isolde said made horrible logical sense. Why else would Dorian choose her? Why else bring back the woman he'd exiled? She was useful, expendable, worthless. Thalia, she looked up. Dorian stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable. How long have you been there? She asked. Long enough. Is it true? The words came out broken. Were you with her that night? Dorian was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, yes. The world shattered. Yes. The single word hung in the air between them like an executioner's blade. Thalia felt something inside her chest crack. Not her heart. Something deeper. The fragile, foolish hope she'd been nursing that maybe, just maybe, Dorian Blackthorne was different from every other person who'd used her and thrown her away. Get away from me, she whispered. Dorian took a step forward. Let me explain to no. Her voice gained strength. No more lies. No more manipulation. I'm done. She pushed past him, heading for the French doors, the ballroom, the exit. Anywhere but here. She'd find a way to save Bryn without selling her soul to a vampire who Dorian's hand caught her wrist. Not hard. He could have crushed her bones with the barest pressure. Instead, his grip was gentle, desperate. Please, he said, just listen. Why should I? Because Isolde told you half a truth designed to look like a whole lie. His pale eyes burned into hers, and half-truths are more dangerous than any poison. Thalia wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to hit him until her hands broke. Instead, she went very still. Talk, she said, fast. Dorian released her wrist, stepped back, gave her space. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. 4 years ago, Isolde came to the estate, uninvited. She brought a treaty proposal, an alliance between our territories. I was not interested, but she insisted we discuss it over drinks. I accepted 1 glass of wine. He paused. I woke up 6 hours later in my chambers. Isolde was beside me, clothed. I was clothed. Nothing had happened, but she'd made it look like something had. Why? Because she knew about you. Dorian's expression twisted. She knew I cared for you in ways that violated every law of vampire-human relations. Bloodbounds are servants, tools. We don't love them. We don't cherish them. We certainly don't imagine futures with them. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I did, with you. Talia's breath caught. When I woke up and saw her beside me, I knew immediately what she'd done. Drugged me, staged a scene, created leverage, and she had. Because that same morning she discovered my signet ring in your quarters. She had witnesses ready, evidence prepared, a narrative constructed. Listen, you could have defended me. If I'd defended you, the council would have investigated everything. Isolde would have revealed her proof that I'd slept with her while blood bonded to you. A lord betraying his bloodbound's trust is grounds for territory seizure. The council would have stripped me of Boston and executed you for the crime of being loved by someone too weak to protect you properly. His words hit like hammer blows. So I made a choice, Dorian continued. I exiled you publicly, harshly, made it look like I despised you, made the council believe I'd never cared at all. It was the only way to save your life. You could have told me, and risk you trying to defend me, risk you saying something that would get you killed. He shook his head. I watched you walk out those gates 4 years ago. I watched you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back and hatred in your eyes. It was the worst night of my existence. But you lived. That was all that mattered. Silence stretched between them. The ocean crashed below. The ballroom hummed with vampire politics behind them. And Thalia stood at the intersection of past and present, trying to decide which version of the truth to believe. Isolde said you were using me, she said finally, that I'm just a womb, a means to an end. You are a means to an end, Dorian said bluntly. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. I need an heir. You need money for Bryn. That's the transaction. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating off his skin. But Thalia, I could have chosen any compatible human. The ritual doesn't require a former bloodbound. I chose you because when I imagine 60 days of carrying my child, of being vulnerable and afraid and in pain, I can't stomach the thought of putting anyone through that except the one woman I know is strong enough to survive it. That's a terrible compliment. It's the truth. His hand lifted, hesitated, fell back to his side. I'm not good at this, at feelings, at being human. I've been dead for 400 years. But you make me want to remember what warmth feels like. Talia closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself, to not believe in fairy tales told by monsters. But she thought of Bryn, thought of the contract signed in blood and magic, thought of how she'd already made her choice before ever stepping foot in this mansion. If you're lying to me again, she said quietly, opening her eyes, I will find a way to make you regret it. I know. And after this is over, after I give you your heir, I'm gone. No looking back. Something in Dorian's expression cracked, pain so raw and real that it made him look almost human. I know, he said again. Thalia nodded once. When is the ritual? Tomorrow night. Moonrise. And then we should both get some rest. She walked past him, back into the ballroom, back through the sea of vampires who watched her with predatory interest. She felt their eyes on her skin, felt their judgment, felt their certainty that she wouldn't survive. Maybe they were right, but she'd die trying. The moonlight chamber sat at the highest point of Blackthorn Estate, a circular room with walls made entirely of glass open to the sky. The floor was etched with silver runes that pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't quite alive and wasn't quite dead. Thalia stood at the center of the circle wearing a simple white slip. Her feet were bare against cold stone. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. She'd never felt more exposed. Around the perimeter, 13 candles burned with blue flame. William had lit them at sunset, murmuring prayers in a language that predated Latin. Now he stood by the door, a silent guardian between worlds. The moon rose over the Atlantic, full, bloated, heavy with meaning. Dorian entered as the first ray of moonlight touched the floor. He wore nothing but black trousers. His torso was a landscape of pale muscle and old scars, evidence of battles fought before Thalia's grandparents were born. In his hand, he carried a silver goblet. Last chance, he said. You can still walk away. No, Talia replied, I can't. The pain will be, I know. You could die. I know that too. She met his gaze. Stop giving me reasons to run and start telling me what to do. Dorian's lips quirked, almost a smile. He approached her slowly, set the goblet on a small altar carved from obsidian. Then he withdrew a silver knife from his belt. The ritual requires blood, he said. Mine, yours, mixed. He cut his palm. Dark blood, almost black, welled up and dripped into the goblet. The runes on the floor pulsed brighter, responding to vampire essence. Then he offered Thalia the knife. Her hand trembled as she took it. The blade was cold, sharp, honest. She cut her palm. The pain was sharp and clean. Red blood, human and warm, dripped into the goblet, mixing with Dorian's darkness. The mixture began to glow. Dorian picked up the goblet with both hands, spoke words in that ancient tongue. The air grew heavy, thick, alive with magic that made Thalia's teeth ache and her bones vibrate. Drink, he said, offering her the goblet. Thalia looked at the swirling mixture. It smelled like copper and smoke and something else. Something old. Something that had watched civilizations rise and fall and rise again. She drank. The liquid was thick, warm. It slid down her throat like living fire. The moment it hit her stomach, the world exploded. Pain, not physical, worse. It was the pain of two incompatible things being forced to merge. Life and death, warmth and cold, human and vampire. Her cells screamed as they tried to reject the invasion, tried to expel the foreign essence flooding her system. She collapsed. Dorian caught her before she hit the stone, lowered her gently to the center of the rune circle. The silver markings began to crawl across the floor. They moved like living things, like serpents made of light wrapping around her ankles, her wrists, her throat. Focus on me, Dorian commanded. His face hovered above hers. Only me. Don't let the magic take you. But the magic was everywhere, inside her, around her, rewriting her biology in real time. She felt her womb shift, change, prepare itself for something that should be impossible. Memories flooded her mind, not hers, Dorian's. She saw the world through his eyes, saw centuries unfold like pages in a book, saw him as a human man, young and afraid, dying of plague in a London gutter, saw the vampire who'd turned him, saw the first time he'd killed, the first time he'd loved, the first time he'd lost someone he couldn't save. She saw herself, 4 years ago, sitting across from him in his study reviewing reports, laughing at something he'd said. The memory came with emotion, not as usual cold calculation, but warmth, affection, the terrifying, vulnerable feeling of caring for something mortal and fragile and destined to die. He'd loved her even then, The realization was a knife between her ribs. The ritual reached its crescendo. Dorian bit his wrist, tearing the vein, and pressed the wound to Thalia's lips. She drank again. This time the blood tasted different. Not like death, like power. Strength flooded her body. Her senses exploded. She could hear William's heartbeat from across the room. Could smell the salt in the ocean 300 yards away. Could feel every thread in the silk beneath her back. And she could feel something else. A spark, deep in her womb, tiny, impossible, alive. "It's done," Dorian said. His voice sounded far away. "The child has been conceived." Talia's vision blurred. The ceiling above her swam with stars and moonlight and possibilities. She felt Dorian lift her, felt him carry her somewhere soft, felt the world slip away into darkness that was warm instead of cold. For the first time in 4 years, she felt safe. Thalia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed over her like a wave. The ritual, the blood, the impossible spark of life taking root inside her. She sat up carefully. Her body felt different, stronger. Her senses were still heightened. She could hear servants moving through the hallways, could smell breakfast cooking in the kitchens below. A note sat on the bedside table. Dorian's precise handwriting. "Rest. Your body needs time to adjust. William will bring you anything you require." Thalia set the note down, placed a hand on her stomach. It felt no different than it had yesterday. Flat, empty, normal. But she knew something was growing there. Something that would either save her or kill her. Probably both. The door opened. William entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Grayson. I trust you're feeling well." "I feel, strange. The ritual's effects will stabilize within a few days. Master Dorian suggests light activity. No exertion. Your body is working very hard even when you're resting." William set the tray down. Eggs, toast, fruit, and a small glass filled with dark red liquid. Thalia stared at it. "Is that blood tonic? You'll need to consume 1 glass daily. It supplements what the child takes from your system." The child, it was real, happening, irreversible. "Where is Dorian? Council business. He'll return this evening." William paused. "He asked me to give you this." He handed her a phone. A smartphone, new, expensive. "I thought no outside communication." "Master Dorian has reconsidered. You may call your sister, but please be discreet. Don't mention specifics of the ritual or your location." Talia took the phone with trembling hands. "Thank you." William bowed and left. Alone, Thalia stared at the phone. Then she dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang twice. "Hello?" Bryn's voice sounded thin, tired. "It's me," Thalia said. "Thali, oh my God, I've been so worried. You disappeared. You didn't answer my calls. I thought, I'm okay, I'm safe. Where are you?" "I can't tell you that, but Bryn, listen. I got the money." Silence. "What?" "The treatment, Zurich, all of it. It's handled." "Thali, what did you do?" "Something crazy, something dangerous, but it's done. Dr. Morrison should be getting a call today about transferring you to the Institute." Bryn's voice cracked. "You sold yourself, didn't you, to whoever made that offer?" "I made a choice." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you right now." Talia closed her eyes. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Another long silence. "I trust you," Bryn finally said. "But Thali, when this is over, whatever this is, you better come back to me. You hear me? I'm not losing my sister." "You won't," Talia promised, hoping it was true. They talked for another 10 minutes. Bryn told her about the new nurse who couldn't find a vein, about the terrible hospital food, about the book club she'd started with other patients, normal things, human things. When they hung up, Thalia felt lighter and heavier because she'd just promised something she might not be able to keep. 1 week passed in strange domesticity. Thalia's body changed rapidly. By day 3, she could no longer stomach normal food. Everything tasted like ash and regret. William prepared blood-rare steaks and iron supplements. She forced them down. By day 5, she started showing. Just slightly, a firmness to her lower abdomen that hadn't been there before. Vampire pregnancy accelerated everything. 2 months would feel like 9. By day 7, Dorian requested her presence in his study. The room was exactly as she remembered. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, the smell of old leather and older secrets. Dorian stood by the window silhouetted against morning light. He turned when she entered. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I'm being consumed from the inside out." "That's normal." "Nothing about this is normal." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair point. He gestured to a chair. Sit, please. We need to discuss something. Talia sat. Her enhanced senses picked up tension in the room. Something was wrong. I had the council physician examine your blood samples, Dorian said. Standard procedure for pregnancy monitoring. She found something unexpected. What? He slid a file across the desk. Medical reports, genetic sequencing, charts that look like star maps. You carry a genetic anomaly, Dorian said. A mutation so rare that it was thought extinct. The catalyst gene. What does that mean? It means your bloodline somewhere far back includes someone who was more than human. Not vampire, not lichen, something older. The catalyst gene allows human biology to successfully anchor supernatural essence. It's why the blood bond with me was so strong. Why the ritual worked. Why you can carry a vampire child when no one else in 3 centuries could. Thalia stared at the reports. What part something? Your human DNA is dominant. You're not supernatural yourself, but you carry the capacity for bridging the gap between our worlds. Dorian's expression was grave. This makes you extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily vulnerable. To whom? To everyone who wants to control the future of vampire-human relations. As if summoned by the words, a crash echoed from somewhere in the mansion. Breaking glass, shouting. Dorian was on his feet instantly. Stay here if I am. What's happening? Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but William or me. He was gone before she could argue. Thalia stood frozen. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide. But where the estate was huge, she didn't know the layout anymore. Footsteps in the hallway, running. The door burst open. It wasn't Dorian. It wasn't William. Vincent Cross, head of Blackthorn Estate Security, stood in the doorway. Tall, muscular, handsome in a brutal way, and holding a gun loaded with silver bullets. Miss Grayson, he said politely, I'm afraid you need to come with me. Talia backed away. Dorian said, Dorian is occupied with a minor security breach I arranged on the west side of the estate. We have approximately 3 minutes before he realizes it's a diversion. Vincent moved into the room. Please don't make this difficult. You're the leak. You're working for Isolde. I'm working for people who make Isolde Ravencroft look like a provincial amateur. Vincent's expression was apologetic. I take no pleasure in this. You seem like a decent person, but you're carrying something that doesn't belong to Lord Blackthorn alone. That child is the future of vampire evolution. The European Syndicate has prior claim. The what? Questions later. Movement now. He raised the gun. Thalia didn't think. The enhanced reflexes from the ritual took over. She grabbed a heavy bookend from Dorian's desk and threw it. Her aim was terrible. It missed Vincent by 2 feet, but it bought her a second. She ran out the door, into the hallway. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the gun, away from the man who was supposed to protect her. Vincent's footsteps pounded behind her. Faster. He was trained, professional. She was a waitress with supernatural pregnancy hormones. This was not a fair fight. She rounded a corner. Saw a staircase. Took it. Down. Always down. Maybe she could reach the kitchens, hide among the staff, scream for help. She made it 2 floors before Vincent caught her. His hand closed around her arm, spun her around, slammed her against the wall with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. Enough, he said. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if... A blur of darkness materialized between them. One moment Vincent was there, the next he was airborne. Dorian had appeared from nowhere and thrown him down the stairwell with the casual violence of a man swatting a fly. Vincent's body hit the landing below with a sickening crack. Dorian turned to Thalia. His eyes were completely black. No iris, no pupil, just void. Are you hurt? His voice was barely recognizable, a monster wearing her protector's skin. I'm okay. He pulled her against his chest. His heart didn't beat, but she felt something else. A vibration. Fury held barely in check. He touched you, Dorian said. Each word precise, controlled, terrifying. He put his hands on you while you're carrying my child. Dorian, Sheseham, Arwen. Stay here. He descended the stairs, each footfall deliberate. Thalia watched from above as he reached Vincent's broken body. The head of security tried to crawl away. Dorian stepped on his leg. The bone cracked like kindling. Vincent screamed. Who sent you? Dorian's voice was silk over razors. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Dorian crouched, grabbed Vincent's hand, started bending fingers backward one at a time. Methodical, patient, each snap punctuated by Vincent's shrieks. European, syndicate, Vincent gasped. They've been planning this for years, plant operatives in American territories. Wait for the right moment. You creating a living heir. That's the moment. Why control if American vampires can have daywalkers, biological children will dominate. Europe can't allow that. They want the child to study, replicate, or destroy. Dorian's expression didn't change. How many others in my household? Just me. I was enough. You failed. Dorian's hand moved to Vincent's throat. There was no dramatic pause, no villain monologue, just quick, brutal efficiency. Vincent's neck snapped. Silence flooded the stairwell. Dorian stood, wiped his hands on his trousers as if brushing off dust. Then he looked up at Talia. The black in his eyes receded slowly. Color returned. Humanity, or the vampire approximation of it, seeped back in. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. Talia descended the stairs on shaking legs. She'd seen violence before, lived in rough neighborhoods, witnessed bar fights and domestic disputes. But this was different. This was surgical, professional. The violence of something that had killed so many times it had become routine. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt safe. Is it true, she asked, about the European syndicate? Yes. Dorian's jaw tightened. Vincent was telling the truth. They've been positioning assets for decades, waiting for something like this, a vulnerability to exploit. The child. Dorian corrected. The child is potential. You're the reality. As long as you're alive and pregnant, you're their primary target. Talia placed a hand on her stomach, the small swell where life was growing at an impossible rate. What do? We lock down the estate, trust no one, and we prepare for war. The next week transformed Blackthorn Estate into a fortress. Dorian hired mercenaries, human ones loyal only to money. He tripled the guard rotation, installed new wards magic barriers that would incinerate anyone crossing the property line without permission. William oversaw food preparation personally. Everything Thalia ate was tested, twice, and Thalia herself was confined to the East Wing. For her protection, Dorian said. For the child, always the child. She was 3 weeks pregnant now. She looked 5 months. Her body was expanding rapidly, making room for something that grew faster than human biology could accommodate. Her ribs ached constantly. Her back screamed. She couldn't sleep for more than 2 hours without waking up starving. The blood tonic helped. Barely. Dorian visited every evening, checked on her, asked if she needed anything, maintained careful distance. She found herself wanting him closer. It was insane. Stockholm Syndrome, probably. Some twisted psychological response to trauma and captivity. But when he sat across from her in the sitting room reading while she pretended to read, she felt calm. On day 22, she finally asked the question that had been eating at her. Do you regret bringing me back? Dorian looked up from his book. Why would I regret it? Because I've been nothing but trouble. Vincent's betrayal. The syndicate threat. If you'd chosen someone else. There was no one else, he interrupted. The catalyst gene isn't something you can test for. I didn't know you had it until after the ritual. I brought you back because you were the only one I trusted. You exiled me. I trusted you to survive it. His pale eyes met hers. I trusted you to be stronger than my failures. I was right. Talia's throat tightened. I'm not strong. I'm terrified every single day. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's fear plus forward motion. He set down his book. You signed that contract knowing you might die. You drank from the goblet anyway. You're carrying a child that's slowly consuming your life force, and you haven't once asked to terminate the pregnancy. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. I'm doing it for Bryn. You're doing it for you too, Dorian said gently, whether you admit it or not. Before she could respond, a wave of pain hit her. Sharp, sudden, centering in her womb. She gasped, doubled over. Dorian was beside her instantly. What's wrong? It hurts. Something's... Another wave. Stronger. The child inside her was moving, kicking, but impossibly hard, like being punched from the inside. Call the physician, Dorian barked at William, who'd appeared in the doorway. The doctor arrived within minutes. Doctora Helena Frost, ancient vampire, renowned medical expert. She examined Thalia with clinical efficiency. The child is reacting to stress, Dr. Frost announced. Probably the mother's elevated cortisol levels. The fetus is developing defensive responses already. Quite remarkable. Is she in danger? Dorian demanded. Not immediate danger, but her blood pressure is too high. She needs rest, calm, and the doctor hesitated. What? She needs to feed from you, directly. The room went silent. Absolutely not, Dorian said. The child is taking too much from her system. She's deteriorating faster than expected. The blood tonic isn't enough. She needs fresh vampire essence from the father. It's the only way to stabilize both of them. Talia's vision blurred. The pain was getting worse, spreading. Her whole body felt like it was tearing apart. Dorian, she gasped. Please. He looked at her, really looked. Saw the pallor of her skin, the shadows under her eyes, the trembling in her hands. It will reactivate the blood bond, he said quietly. Completely. You'll feel everything I feel. See my thoughts. It's invasive. I don't care. I can't. Another wave of pain. She screamed. Dorian made his decision. He bit his wrist, tore the vein, pressed it to her lips. Drink. Talia drank. The blood was cold, thick. It tasted like metal and midnight and 400 years of accumulated darkness. But it was also power. Strength flooded her system. The pain receded. Her vision cleared. And then connection. The blood bond snapped into place like a circuit completing. Suddenly she wasn't just in her own head. She was in his, feeling what he felt, knowing what he knew. Fear. Bone-deep existential fear that she would die and he would be alone again. Longing. The ache of 4 years spent trying to forget someone who'd left fingerprints on his soul. Determination. The cold, calculating resolve to protect her at any cost. Even if it meant burning down the entire vampire world. And underneath it all, woven through every thought and feeling like a golden thread. Love. He loved her. Not the distant affection of a lord for a favored servant, but real, vulnerable, terrifying love. The kind that made immortals mortal. The kind that turned predators into protectors. Thalia pulled back from his wrist, gasping. Their eyes met. He knew she'd felt it, seen it, couldn't pretend anymore. Thalia, he started. Don't, she whispered. Don't say it. If you say it, it becomes real. And if it's real, I don't know what to do with it. Because she felt it too. That was the terrifying part. The bond showed her his heart, but it also showed her own. She loved him back. Loved the monster who'd destroyed her life and rebuilt it. Loved the vampire who killed without hesitation to protect her. Loved the man who sat across from her reading poetry written in dead languages just to be near her. It was insane. It was impossible. It was true. Day 34. Thalia woke to the sound of breaking glass. Not nearby. Somewhere below. Distant. But her enhanced hearing picked it up. Picked up the alarms that followed. The shouting. The gunfire. They were under attack. She rolled out of bed, difficult now with her distended stomach, and grabbed the robe William had left for her. Through the window she saw figures moving across the lawn. Too many to count. Armed. Organized. The European syndicate had come for her. The door burst open. William looking disheveled for the first time since she'd known him. We need to move you to the safe room. Now. Where's Dorian? Fighting. Miss Grayson, we don't have time. An explosion rocked the building. The chandelier in the sitting room crashed to the floor. Thalia stumbled. William caught her. This way, quickly. He led her through a maze of corridors. Thalia's heart pounded. The child inside her thrashed, responding to her fear. Each kick was painful, distracting. They reached a hidden door behind a bookshelf. William pressed his hand to the wood. Magic flared. The door swung open, revealing a steel-reinforced room beyond. Inside. Lock it behind me. Don't open for anyone but Lord Blackthorn. Where are you going? To help defend the estate. Go. Thalia went. The safe room was small, windowless, a bed, some supplies, a panic button connected directly to emergency services. She locked the door, leaned against it, tried to breathe. The child kicked again, harder. I know, she whispered, placing a hand on her stomach. I'm scared too. Through the blood bond she felt Dorian, felt his rage, his violence, his single-minded focus on eliminating threats. He was a whirlwind of death out there, protecting her, protecting their child. Time crawled, minutes felt like hours. Then silence. The explosion stopped. The gunfire ceased. The world held its breath. Footsteps approached the safe room. Slow, deliberate. Thalia, Dorian's voice. It's me, open the door. She hesitated. The bond told her it was him, felt like him. But what if the code phrase she called? What's the code phrase? They'd established 1 week ago, something only they would know. You asked me why I chose you, Dorian said. And I told you because you make me want to remember what warmth feels like. It was him. Talia unlocked the door. Dorian stood in the hallway covered in blood. Not his. His clothes were shredded. His face was spattered with gore. But his eyes were clear, focused, fixed on her. Are you hurt? He demanded. No, the baby. I can feel the baby through the bond. He's fine. You are both fine. He exhaled slowly. The tension in his shoulders eased fractionally. It's over. We held them off. How many? 50, maybe more. Mercenaries, battle mages. Isolde Ravencroft herself. Talia's breath caught. She was here. She led the attack. She's working with the syndicate. Has been from the beginning. Dorian's expression darkened. I should have killed her at the gala. Where is she now? Gone, retreated when she realized she couldn't breach the safe room. But Thalia, this was just the first wave. They'll come again. Better prepared, more determined. On what do we do? Dorian stepped into the safe room, closed the door behind him. In the small space, he seemed larger than life. Dangerous, beautiful. Hers. We accelerate the timeline, he said. The baby is developing faster than expected. Dr. Frost believes you'll give birth within the next 2 weeks instead of 4. We prepare for that. Fortify the moonlight chamber. Make it impenetrable. And then we pray the child is born healthy. Because once he's here, once he's real, the entire vampire world will have to recognize him. Protect him. Even the syndicate won't risk open war with a daywalker heir. Talia placed both hands on her stomach, felt the life it taught her, growing, changing, becoming. I'm so tired, she whispered. Dorian's expression softened. He crossed the small space between them, pulled her into his arms, carefully, like she was made of glass. I know, he murmured against her hair. I know. But you're almost there, just a little longer. Talia pressed her face against his chest. He was cold. He smelled like blood and violence. He was a monster, but he was her monster. And against all logic, all reason, all self-preservation instinct, she loved him. Dorian, she said, yes. When this is over, when the baby is born and I've healed and everything goes back to normal. She pulled back to look at him. What happens to us? His pale eyes searched hers. She saw the war happening behind them. Duty versus desire. Logic versus longing. I don't know, he said honestly. I want to promise you forever. But I'm a vampire. Forever is all I have. And you're human. You'll age, grow old, die. I'll have to watch it happen. His voice cracked. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. Then turn me. The words hung between them. Dorian went very still. What? After the baby is born, after I've recovered, turn me. Make me like you. Then we'll both have forever. Thalia, you don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. Her voice was steel. I'm asking for a choice. For once in my life, I'm choosing something for me. Not for Bryn, not for money, not for survival. For me. I'm choosing you. Dorian stared at her. 1,000 emotions flickered across his face, too fast to name. Then he kissed her. Not gently, not carefully, like a drowning man finding air. His cold lips against her warm ones. His hands in her hair, her belly pressed between them, the child inside kicking in response to their parents' emotions. When they broke apart, both breathless, Dorian rested his forehead against hers. Ask me again after the birth, he whispered. When you've survived. When you've seen what motherhood means. When you've had time to think clearly. If you still want forever, then I'll give it to you. Promise. I promise. Outside, the sun began to rise over Blackthorn Estate. Another day survived. Another battle won. But the war was far from over. Day 48. Thalia woke to liquid warmth spreading between her legs. For a moment, she thought she'd wet herself. Pregnancy did strange things to bladder control. But then the cramping started. Low, deep, a tightening sensation that felt like her body was preparing to turn itself inside out. Her water had broken. Dorian, she called. Her voice came out thin, reedy. He materialized in the doorway instantly. He'd been sleeping in the chair beside her bed for the past week, refusing to leave her side, refusing to let her out of his sight. What's wrong, Wow? It's time. The color drained from his already pale face. It's too early. You're only at day 48. We have 12 more days. Tell that to your son. Another contraction hit. Thalia gasped, gripping the sheets. He's coming now. Dorian moved with the swift efficiency of someone who'd survived 4 centuries by making fast decisions. He scooped her into his arms. carried her through hallways that blurred past. Upstairs, higher, always higher, to the moonlight chamber. The room where life and death had merged once before, where they would merge again. William was already there lighting the blue candles. Dr. Frost arrived moments later, her medical bag in hand, her expression carved from professional calm. "Lay her in the center," the doctor ordered. Dorian placed Thalia on the rune-etched floor as gently as a man handling nitroglycerin. The silver markings began to glow, responding to the life about to enter the world. "Contractions?" Dr. Frost asked, examining Thalia with quick, efficient hands. "Every 2 minutes," Thalia panted. "Getting closer. You're at 7 centimeters. This is happening fast, too fast." The doctor looked at Dorian. "The child is pushing to be born. His vampire biology is accelerating the process. Her human body can't keep up. When she hits transition, it's going to be... I don't care how bad it is." Thalia's voice cut through the clinical assessment. "I'm not dying. Not before I see him. Not before I hold him." Dr. Frost's ancient eyes softened slightly. "Then fight, girl. Fight harder than you've ever fought for anything." Another contraction. Stronger. Thalia screamed. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined. It felt like being torn apart from the inside. Like her body was a shell too small for what it contained. The child inside her pushed, demanded, took. Through the blood bond, she felt Dorian's panic, his helplessness. For the first time in 400 years, he was facing something he couldn't kill, couldn't control, couldn't fix. He could only watch. "I need to push," Thalia gasped. "Not yet. You're not fully dilated." "I don't care. I need to." Another wave crashed over her. Her back arched. Her fingers clawed at the stone floor. And then above the sound of her own agony, she heard something else. Explosions. Gunfire. Screaming. Dorian's head snapped toward the glass walls. In the distance, fires bloomed across the estate grounds. Figures moved in organized formations. An army. Not mercenaries this time. Vampires. "They're here," William said from his position by the door. His hand rested on the sword at his hip. "The European forces, at least 100 strong." "Lock down the chamber," Dorian commanded. "Nothing gets through that door." "My lord, you can't fight them alone." "I won't be alone." Dorian looked at the dozen mercenary guards positioned around the perimeter, human soldiers who'd proven their loyalty with blood. "We hold this room. Nothing else matters." Talia grabbed his hand. Her grip was weak, trembling. "Don't leave me." "I'm not leaving. I'm right here." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm right here." The chamber doors shuddered. Someone was trying to break through. Magic flared. The wards Dorian had placed were holding. "But for how long?" 8 centimeters, Dr. Frost announced. "Almost there." Almost. But almost didn't matter if the doors broke before the baby was born. The assault on the moonlight chamber was systematic, professional, terrifying. European battle mages hammered at the wards with spells that made the air shimmer and crack. Vampire warriors threw themselves at the reinforced doors with the kind of suicidal determination that came from following orders backed by absolute authority. Inside, Dorian stood at the threshold, a wall of darkness between his vulnerable family and the world that wanted to destroy them. When the first ward shattered, 3 vampires burst through. Dorian killed them before they took 2 steps. His movements were liquid violence, precise, efficient, brutal. Bodies hit the floor. More came. He killed them too. Behind him, Thalia screamed. The sound cut through combat noise like a knife through silk. He wanted to turn, wanted to go to her, wanted to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay. But he was the only thing standing between her and death, so he fought. Blood painted the floor, the walls, him. He stopped counting kills after 20, stopped thinking, became pure instinct, pure protection. A father defending his mate and child with the savagery of something far older than civilization. 9 centimeters, Dr. Frost's voice carried over the chaos. "She's almost there. Push them back," Dorian roared at his mercenary guards. "Don't let them pass the doorway." Gunfire, silver bullets designed to slow vampires. The mercenaries were good, well-trained, but they were human, mortal, breakable. One fell, then another, then a third, and the European forces were winning through attrition, and then the doors exploded inward. Not from physical force, from magic. A blast of power so strong it shattered the reinforced steel like paper. The smoke cleared. Isolde Ravencroft stood in the ruined doorway. She wore battle armor, black leather and reinforced plates. Her hair was pulled back from her face, revealing sharp cheekbones and sharper ambition. Behind her, a phalanx of elite vampire warriors waited for orders. Hello, Dorian, she said pleasantly. I believe you have something that belongs to the European Council. You'll die before you touch her. Perhaps, but you'll die first. Isolde gestured. Her warriors moved forward. Dorian met them. The battle was no longer one-sided. These weren't mercenaries or foot soldiers. These were vampires who'd survived centuries of warfare, who'd trained for this, who were prepared for his strength. He killed 3, wounded 5, but they kept coming. Behind him, Thalia screamed again. A different sound this time. Not pain, effort. She's crowning, Dr. Frost shouted. The baby's coming. Dorian felt a distraction like a physical pull, felt his attention split between the threat in front of him and the miracle behind him. Isolde saw the opening. She moved with the speed of old blood and ancient fury. Her blade of silver spelled lethal drove toward his heart. Dorian twisted, too slow. The blade caught him in the shoulder instead of the chest. Silver burned through his system like acid. His arm went numb. Isolde smiled. Sloppy, my lord. Love makes you weak. No, a voice said from behind her. It makes him motivated. William appeared from the shadows. The elderly butler moved like a man half his age. His sword-blessed steel vampire killer swept in a perfect arc. Isolde barely dodged. The blade scored her ribs. She hissed, falling back. The child is not yours to take, William said calmly. Master Dorian's heir will be born under this roof, protected by this household, recognized by the rightful authorities. You will not pass. The old butler's eyes glowed with power Thalia had never seen. Not vampire, something else, something ancient. Isolde's expression shifted. Fear flickered across her face. You're supposed to be retired, she said. I am, but even retired wardens remember how to kill. Warden. The word hung in the air like a promise of violence. Before Isolde could respond, before the battle could resume, a sound filled the chamber. A baby's cry, not a normal newborn wail. This was dual-toned, a human infant's voice layered with something deeper, resonant, powerful. Every vampire in the room froze. He's born, Dr. Frost announced. The heir lives. Talia held her son for the first time with hands that shook from exhaustion and wonder. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Impossibly beautiful in the way we all newborns are, but more. His skin had a faint luminescence. His hair was dark as midnight. And when he opened his eyes, violet. Not red like vampire, not human brown or blue. Violet like amethyst, like twilight, like something caught between two worlds and belonging to both. Soren, she whispered. The name came from nowhere, from everywhere, from the part of her that knew him before he was born. Your name is Soren Blackthorn. The baby Soren turned his head toward her voice, recognized his mother, and smiled. Babies aren't supposed to smile at birth. The medical community is clear about that. It takes weeks for the muscles to develop, for the neural pathways to form. But Soren smiled, and as he did, warmth flooded through Thalia's body. The tearing pain in her lower half began to heal. Knit back together, the hemorrhaging stopped. The exhaustion lifted. She felt strength returning to limbs that had been drained hollow. Impossible, Dr. Frost breathed. The child he's healing her. Not just healing, Dorian said. He'd moved to Thalia's side, silver wound forgotten, staring at his son with wonder. He's generating life force. He's not taking, he's giving. Through the blood bond, Thalia felt Dorian's emotions. Awe, pride, fear, love so intense it was almost painful. Their son was not what anyone expected. Give me the child. Isolde's voice cut through the moment. She stood 20 feet away, surrounded by her warriors covered in blood. But her eyes were fixed on Soren with the intensity of a starving predator. By order of the European High Council, that infant is property of the Syndicate. He will come with us. No, Thalia said. Her voice was steady, clear, absolute. He's my son, and you'll take him over my dead body. That can be arranged. Isolde raised her hand. Her warriors moved forward. Dorian placed himself between them and Thalia. You'll have to go through me first. With pleasure. The warriors charged, and Soren cried. Not upset, not frightened. This was different. A sound of pure power, of instinct responding to threat. The air in the chamber exploded with violet light. A wave of energy radiated from the infant in Thalia's arms. It moved like a physical force, like a tsunami made of magic and biology and something far older than either. It hit the attacking vampires, and they changed. Their skin lost its unnatural pallor. Their fangs retracted. Their eyes, formerly predatory, ancient inhumans, suddenly looked mortal, confused, afraid. They'd been turned back, not into fledglings, into humans. What they were before being transformed, before becoming undead. 50% of Isolde's forces collapsed, not dead, but powerless, mortal, vulnerable. What did you do? Isolde's voice was shrill, panicked. She looked at her hands. They were aging before her eyes, lines appearing. Liver spots blooming, her lustrous hair dulling to gray. She was reverting, not to what she'd been when turned, to what she should be now, her chronological age catching up with her biological form. Within seconds, the devastating beauty who'd terrorized vampire politics for 2 centuries was a withered woman in her 60s. Weak, mortal, ordinary. The Nightborn, someone whispered. One of the European vampires who'd survived the wave. The prophecy was true. Soren quieted in Thalia's arms. His violet eyes blinked slowly. Satisfied, safe. He'd just rewritten the rules of existence. Isolde fell to her knees. Her warriors, those who remained vampires, stared at her with horror and disgust. Their beautiful, powerful leader was now a frail human woman, worthless in their eyes. Help me up, Isolde croaked at them. I order you, you order nothing. The vampire who spoke was tall, European accent, cold eyes. You were sent to retrieve the child. You failed. You're human now. You're nothing. He turned to leave. Wait, desperation made Isolde's voice crack. You can't just abandon me. I did everything the council asked. I planted myself in Boston 4 years ago. I framed the Bloodbound. I created the conditions for the ritual. I followed the plan. And you failed at the final step, the vampire said dismissively. The council has no use for failures. Or humans. Talia stood still, holding Soren supported by Dorian's arm around her waist. She looked at Isolde, at the woman who'd destroyed her life, who'd tried to kill her child, and she felt pity. What plan? Thalia asked. What is she talking about? The European vampire paused, considered, then smiled coldly. Why not? You've already won. You deserve to know what you've disrupted. He gestured at Isolde. Tell them. Tell them what the European High Council has been planning for 50 years. Isolde's weathered face twisted with hatred and resignation. The catalyst gene, she spat. We've known about it for decades. Knew that eventually someone with active expression would surface. We placed operatives in every major American territory, waiting, watching. For what? Dorian demanded. For you to get desperate enough to try the Moonborn ritual. The council knew about the Primarch curse. They created it 400 years ago, planted it in the Blackthorn bloodline like a time bomb, waiting for the moment when you'd be forced to produce an heir. The revelation hit like a physical blow. You cursed my family. The council cursed your family. I was just the instrument. Isolde's laugh was bitter. The plan was perfect. Force you to create a Daywalker heir. Let the child be born, then steal it. Raise it as a weapon. Use its reversion ability to control the entire vampire population. Any vampire who disobeys the council reverted to human. Instant death sentence. You were going to enslave our entire species. Dr. Frost said, horror in her voice. We were going to bring order, control, a new world where European authority was absolute. Isolde looked at Soren. That child was supposed to be our nuclear option, our guarantee of total power. Was, Thalia asked. The European vampire who'd condemned Isolde spoke again. Now he's yours. Lady Ravencroft failed. The council will withdraw for now. But mark my words, Lord Blackthorn, this isn't over. We know what the child can do. We know what he'll become. Eventually we'll find a way to claim him or destroy him. Then you'll die trying, Dorian said softly. Lethally. The vampire smiled without warmth. We'll see. He gestured to his remaining forces. They withdrew, stepping over human bodies, their former comrades, without a second glance, leaving Isolde alone on the floor of the moonlight chamber. She looked up at Talia with eyes full of venom. You think you've won? You're human, mortal. In 60 years you'll be dead, and he'll still be here. Still vampire, still eternal. He'll watch you age, watch you wither, watch you die, and then he'll find someone new, someone younger, someone who can give him more children. You're just the first. The prototype. You mean nothing. Talia walked toward her, each step measured, calm. She stopped directly in front of the woman who'd ruined her life and smiled. You're wrong, Thalia said quietly. I'm not just the first, I'm the only one with the catalyst gene, the only one who can bear Daywalker children. The only one who survived the ritual. And after I recover, Dorian will turn me. I'll have eternity too. Though you have maybe 20 years left. As a human, powerless, forgotten. Alone, she turned to Dorian. What's the punishment for treason against a vampire lord? Execution, Dorian said, traditionally. But she's human now, Thalia pointed out. Your laws don't apply to humans. No, they don't. So what do we do with her? Dorian studied Isolde with the expression of a man considering garbage disposal options. We let her live, he said finally, as a human. Strip her of titles, wealth, connections. Let her experience the poverty and powerlessness she inflicted on others. Let her die slowly. Forgotten. Irrelevant. It was crueler than death. Isolde's face crumpled. You can't. Get her out of my sight, Dorian ordered William. Find her a room, in the servants' quarters. She can work off her crimes, scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, being useful for once in her miserable existence. William bowed, grabbed Isolde by the arm, dragged her away despite her protests. Silence filled the chamber. Thalia looked down at Soren, at the baby who'd just rewritten reality, who'd saved her life, who'd destroyed their enemies with nothing but instinct and love. We did it, she whispered. Dorian pulled her close, careful of the infant between them. You did it, he corrected. You survived, you fought, you brought him into this world despite everything trying to stop you. We make a good team. The best. Soren yawned, a tiny perfect baby yawn. As if saving his parents from centuries-old conspiracies was exhausting work. Thalia laughed. The sound was relief and joy and exhaustion, all mixed together. They were alive. They'd won. 3 days later, Dorian called an emergency session of the Vampire Council. Thalia stood at his side, holding Soren as they entered the great chamber, where vampire lords had deliberated for centuries. She wore a gown of midnight blue. Simple, elegant. The obsidian necklace at her throat marked her as protected, as claimed. The 12 lords and ladies sat in their high-backed chairs watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation to outright hostility. Ambrose Sterling, the High Inquisitor, sat at the head of the circle. His blindfolded eyes somehow seemed to track their movement. The council recognizes Lord Dorian Blackthorne, Ambrose said formally, and his companion. My wife, Dorian corrected coldly. Lady Thalia Blackthorne, legally married under both human and vampire law, mother of my heir, carrier of the catalyst gene. Show her the respect she's earned or answer to me. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Of course, Ambrose said smoothly. Forgive the oversight. Lady Blackthorne, you are most welcome. Thalia inclined her head, said nothing. Let her presence speak. You called this session, Ambrose continued. Explain. Dorian stepped forward. 3 days ago, my estate was attacked by European forces led by Isolde Ravencroft. They came to steal my newborn son. They failed. In the process, my son Soren Blackthorne revealed an ability that changes everything. He gestured. Dr. Frost stepped forward, carrying documentation. Medical reports, genetic analyses, video recordings of the reversion wave. Soren possesses the power to revert vampires to their original human state, Dr. Frost announced. The transformation is permanent, irreversible. He is in essence a biological counter to vampirism itself. The chamber erupted, vampires shouting, arguing, denying. The implications were too vast, too terrifying. Ambrose raised his hand. Silence fell. You claim the child is a weapon against our kind. Not a weapon, Thalia spoke for the first time. Her voice was clear, strong. A balance. Soren doesn't attack unprovoked. He responds to threats, to danger. Those European vampires who attacked us half were reverted. The half that showed aggression. The others, those who stood back, who showed restraint, remained untouched. So the child judges. One of the lords stood, an ancient vampire with a French accent. Decides who deserves to remain immortal. He's a baby, Thalia said flatly. He doesn't decide anything. He reacts, instinctively. If you threaten his family, you lose your immortality. If you leave us alone, you keep it. It's very simple. Nothing about this is simple, another lord argued. That child is a threat to every vampire on Earth. That child, Dorian's voice cracked like a whip, is under my protection. Under council law recognized as legitimate heir protected by territory rights. Anyone who threatens him violates the accords and will be dealt with accordingly. By you, the French vampire scoffed. One lord against the world. By me, Ambrose Sterling said quietly. Everyone turned to the Inquisitor. He stood, removed his blindfold. Revealed eyes that had been wrapped for 300 years. Eyes that could see lies, read souls, judge truth. Eyes that were no longer milky white. They were clear, perfect, violet tinged. 3 days ago, I visited Blackthorn Estate, Ambrose said. I examined the child, and he changed me, healed the damage done by dark magic centuries ago, restored my sight. He looked directly at Thalia, not through violence, through touch, through mercy, through the simple act of being held by an old vampire who'd forgotten what innocence looked like. He turned to address the council. I have seen the future in this child's eyes, and it is not darkness, it is dawn. He represents evolution, the next step for our kind. Those who accept him will thrive. Those who reject him, Ambrose's expression hardened, will find themselves on the wrong side of history. What are you proposing? The French vampire demanded. I propose we recognize Boston as an independent sanctum, self-governing, outside council authority. Lord Blackthorn and Lady Blackthorn will raise their son as they see fit, and in exchange they will not unleash his power against us. That's extortion. That's survival. Ambrose looked around the circle. The European Council tried to control the future. They failed. We can learn from their mistake, or repeat it. Choose wisely. Silence. Then one by one the lords and ladies stood, bowed their heads, acknowledged the new reality. Boston was free. Soren was recognized. And Thalia, former waitress, discarded bloodbound, worthless woman, stood in the Vampire Council chambers as Lady Blackthorn. Equal, powerful, vindicated. 1 year later, Thalia stood in the moonlight chamber once more, the same room where Soren had been conceived, where he'd been born. But tonight was different. Tonight she chose. Dorian stood before her, silver knife in hand. Around them, candles burned with that same blue flame. William waited by the door. Dr. Frost stood ready with medical supplies. But this wasn't a ritual forced by circumstance. This was a transformation chosen freely. Last chance, Dorian said softly. You can still keep your mortality. Thalia smiled. She wore a simple white dress. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. She looked exactly as she had a year ago, but she was different, stronger, a mother, a wife. A woman who'd walked through fire and emerged golden. She touched her throat, felt her pulse beating strong and human. For the last time. I choose forever, she said, with you, with Soren, with our family. Dorian's hand trembled slightly as he lifted the knife. 400 years of existence, and he was still nervous about this, about changing her, about making her like him. Are you sure? He asked one last time. I've never been more sure of anything. He bit his wrist, tore the vein. Blood welled up dark and cold. Drink, he said, and when you wake you'll be mine, truly, eternally. Thalia took his wrist in both hands, pressed it to her lips, drank deeply. The blood tasted different this time. Not like ritual magic or emergency sustenance. This tasted like choice, like freedom, like love. The transformation began immediately. Fire in her veins, ice in her bones. Her human heart stuttered, slowed, stopped. Her cells died and were reborn as something other, something immortal. She collapsed into Dorian's arms. He lowered her gently to the floor, brushed hair from her face, watched as the change took hold. Her skin grew paler, more luminous. Her features sharpened slightly, became more defined, more beautiful in that terrible, inhuman way vampires were beautiful. Her eyes opened, no longer the soft green of river moss, now violet, like twilight, like her son's eyes. A side effect of the catalyst gene, Dr. Frost would later explain. The transformation had activated dormant sequences in Thalia's DNA, made her something more than a normal vampire. She was the first of a new bloodline, the catalyst line. Thalia sat up slowly, felt the power coursing through her body, felt her senses explode into hyper-awareness, heard every heartbeat in the estate, smelled blood and life and death. But most of all, she felt the bond. The blood bond she'd shared with Dorian as a human was nothing compared to this. Now they were equals, eternal partners, bound not by magic alone, but by choice. How do you feel? Dorian asked. Thalia stood, tested her new strength, her new speed, her new senses. Powerful, she said. Her voice was the same but different, carried an edge it hadn't before. Live, free. She looked at him, at the vampire lord who'd bought her, used her, protected her, loved her. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For giving me this choice, for waiting until I was ready, for not making me choose between mortality and you. Dorian pulled her close. I would have waited centuries if needed. You say that now, but you would have been very lonely. I was lonely for 400 years. What's a few more centuries? Thalia laughed. The sound was different too. Musical, dangerous. She was no longer the invisible waitress, the worthless woman, the disposable human. She was Lady Thalia Blackthorn, vampire, mother of the Nightborn, carrier of the catalyst gene, and she had forever to prove it. 6 months later, the Blackthorn estate had never looked more beautiful. Flowers bloomed in the gardens despite the late autumn chill. Music drifted from the ballroom. Laughter echoed through halls that had once been silent as tombs. Thalia stood on the grand staircase looking down at the celebration below. It was Soren's first birthday. He looked like a human 3-year-old now developing at that accelerated rate. Smart, curious, kind. He played with William's grandchildren, human children, who visited the estate without fear because Soren made them feel safe. Bryn stood near the refreshment table, healthy and radiant. She'd met someone, a kind man who owned a bookstore. They were engaged. She glowed with happiness. Dr. Morrison was there too, the human doctor who'd delivered Bryn's prognosis a year ago. She'd been invited to witness the miracle, to see what had become of her patient. Ambrose Sterling stood with the council members who'd come to pay respects. His violet-tinged eyes watched Soren with grandfatherly affection, and Dorian stood at the bottom of the stairs looking up at her. His pale blue eyes met her violet ones. A year of marriage, a lifetime ahead. He extended his hand. Thalia descended, took it, let him pull her into a dance. Happy, he asked, deliriously. No regrets. Only one, as she said. Dorian's expression flickered. What? I regret not meeting you sooner. Think of all the centuries we've missed. He laughed, spun her. We have infinity to make up for lost time. Infinity, she agreed. Across the room, Soren looked up from his play, saw his parents dancing, smiled that smile that could light up the darkest night. He was safe, loved, protected, and someday when he was old enough to understand, they would tell him the story. How his mother was called worthless and barren, how his father was cursed and desperate, how they came together in darkness and created light, how love, real messy, complicated love, could transform the impossible into the inevitable. Thalia caught her reflection in a gold-framed mirror, saw the woman she'd become. Not invisible, not worthless, not discarded, powerful, eternal, chosen. She thought of the girl she'd been, wiping down counters in a greasy diner, wearing polyester uniforms, apologizing for existing. That girl was gone. In her place stood a queen, and the world would never call her worthless again.